Hello, everyone. Welcome to the QAD West Coast User Group Spring Webinar Series for today, May 15th. We're going to give folks about a minute to drop in here, and then I'll start with a brief introduction before we head into our program with Don. All right, hello, welcome everyone. I am Jeff Shelton, administrator for the WECUG, also known as the QAD West Coast User Group. Just wanted to give a brief update on things going on here at the user group. As many of you were probably aware, an email went out a couple of months ago alluding that the user group was going to be disbanding. However, we have quickly resurrected it with a new group of volunteers. So we are in the process of rebuilding and reviving the West Coast User Group with a board of volunteers comprised of some active vendors and sponsors, as well as some customer members that have participated over the years. And I just wanted to give a brief update on that and to stay tuned for additional information coming about the user group in the coming months, and hopefully a fall meeting of some sort in September or October. I would like to say if anyone here would like to be involved, if you want to get involved in the user group to help build membership, plan events, provide content, we're always on the lookout for volunteers, particularly those in the customer community. If you're a QAD user and want to help out the user group in that way, please get in touch with us. You can start at the website, wecug.com, or via email directly to me at WECUG, WECUG at comcast.net. And we would love to solicit your ideas and support. And with that, I'd like to kick off our webinar today, presented by Don Lindsay of 32Soft, Optimizing the Role of Material Requirements Planning in QAD. This must be a very good topic, very hot topic, because we have a large number of attendees for today's webinar. I will like to point out that it is being recorded. It will be available to access on the website if you have to cut out for any reason or want to review it later on. At the end of Don's remarks, we'll open up the session for Q&A. If you have a question you'd like to present to Don, you can either put it in the Q&A feature. There's a button at the bottom, Q&A. You can type your question there. I will field it and read it to Don. Or if you'd like to raise your hand, use the hand raising icon. I will enable your mic and you can ask a question directly through your mic. So with that, I will turn it over to Don Lindsay, our guest speaker today, optimizing the role of material requirements in QAD. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me? And you can see my slides. Good. So good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. I would like to second the comments that Jeff made about the West Coast User Group. We don't want it to lay fallow. We want participation. So like Jeff says, if anybody's interested, please contact him regarding the West Coast User Group. So good afternoon and welcome. This is our third in a series of webinars. And I hope you're having a good 2024 so far. After having presented our first two webinars, one in February on the item master and bill of material, nuts and bolts of MRP. In March, we talked about the ripple effect of changes in MRP. And today I'd like to talk about some more specific tools in MRP that can allow us to optimize the MRP calculations for a more viable working version of MRP. So many organizations think MRP is the magic bullet That if you implement the production planner with the master scheduling workbench, even use the 32 soft production planner application, all your scheduling issues go away. Regrettably, that's not true. MRP is a unique art form that requires close attention to what is happening in the organization. It also tests you and your fellow employees' ability to model reality in terms of ERP setup and your abilities to react to those changes. So here are a few of the things I'd like to cover today under the headings including sales and operations planning, rules of misalignment, lot sizing, scrap, safety stock, forecasting, product change control, and a couple of more besides that. There's always terms and definitions that we need to become familiar with when dealing with the functionality of MRP and QED. Order policy, item, structure types, min-max, all these need to be understood to approach MRP. If you don't know the meaning of a term I use, you can use Google or ChatGPT or Claude. I just got Claude 3, Bard, Perplexity. There's lots of AI out there on the system to assist you, or just go to the knowledge base on the QED website or send us an email. We'll be glad to assist. Everybody uses different expressions for basically the same thing. You need to understand how your organization uses the terminology. I'll point out the difference between idiomatic and nomothetic. Idiomatic, singular. Nomothetic, general. We talk about general concepts. Remember, we apply general concepts at the item level. Before you start, I would suggest you have a good, solid set of work instructions and a company data dictionary or wiki for all the fields and values used by your organization. Just to center us on the MRP process, remember the basic planning flow involves the following steps. You develop your item planning data, then you forecast demand, you explode, we'll talk about that, determine the requirements, then you do your action messages, create work orders, purchase orders, you track inventory and material, you capture those changes, evaluate what happened, and then adjust your plans as needed. You process that every single time you run MRP. We talked in February about the primary element of any ERP system, and that's the part number, as defined by the item or the SKU, or whatever you call it. It's defined in 1.4.1 and contains complete information on everything in your system, from units of measure to descriptions to bills of materials to supplier and customer information. You need to know all of those some odd 80 elements in 1.4.1. We also talked in detail about the parent component relationship. This is probably the most important set of records in your MRP system. The bill of material gives MRP the structure between parents and components to be able to plan what you need. If we turn the bill of material on its side 90 degrees, we can visualize how MRP explodes down from a parent through components for a time-phased explosion of the bill of material to yield our MRP plan. The BOM is the most critical data component of MRP. It enables integrated functionality of QED's manufacturing, inventory, and financial management capabilities. By having accurate and up-to-date BOM, companies can ensure efficient production, effective procurement, and profitability of their products. After we looked at the item master and bill of material, we then dove down into the actual calculations of MRP. And you can see here that we talked about the gross requirements, scheduled receipts, or what we sometimes refer to as paper released, and then we calculated the projected quantity on hand. That projected quantity on hand is simply a calculation that takes the quantity on hand in T minus 1 plus the scheduled receipts in T minus the gross requirements in T equals that projected quantity on hand. When that projected quantity on hand goes negative, MRP plans a planned order receipt, offsets it by the lead time to a planned order release date, and then that basically solves the question of what do I have? What do I need? What have I got to go get? That's basically MRP. We talked about in March the ripple effect of some of the various operational elements, such as purchase orders, work orders, sales orders, inventory, and how they affect MRP. We first looked at a purchase order and how that primary communication tool between you and your supplier are controlled through the purchase order. We looked at how to track PO activity in 2314 and 2317, MRP detail and summary. The purpose of the work order in QAD's ERP application is to serve as the formal authorization and instruction to manufacture a specific quantity of a product or assembly. We covered work order processes, and a little later we'll talk about production order processes. Sales orders in MRP serve as the formal record and commitment for a customer's purchase of specific product or services from you. That is demand in MRP. The sales order allocates and reserves inventory. It triggers production, procurement, and shipping. It maintains a complete history of the sales action and integrates sales orders into other critical ERP activities. The sales order line data creates gross requirements in MRP based on the item, the ordered quantity, and the due date. Besides the bill of material, the inventory record, or what we call the perpetual record, is probably the most critical piece of information for MRP. The perpetual record is defined as the continuously updated quantity on hand and how it got there, i.e. the on-hand balance, all day, every day. Some of us are familiar with TR-HIS. The system automatically updates inventory quantities and costs as transactions occur. The perpetual record provides immediate visibility into current inventory levels and locations. This facilitates effective inventory management and improves financial reporting. Keeping the perpetual record accurate is probably any company's biggest challenge. If you don't have visibility and can't control the quantity on hand, the system fails. Before we start to get into the detail of some MRP, let's consider some of the shortcomings in order to concentrate on those tools that will help us optimize QAD's MRP and help mitigate these known deficiencies. Firstly, MRP has limited focus on variability. MRP assumes a deterministic demand and fixed lead times. In reality, manufacturing systems are subject to significant variability in demand, supply, and production processes. By its very nature, there can be an overemphasis in inventory. MRP can sometimes lead to excess inventory, as its aim is to ensure materials are always available to meet demand. In MRP, bottlenecks are often neglected. If any of you have read The Goal by Ellie Goldrath, we quickly realized that bottleneck operations in a manufacturing process can adversely affect scheduling. This should be a mandatory read for all planners. MRP systems can also be somewhat rigid and lack real-time information. MRP is not easily adaptable to change in demand and schedules. And lastly, and probably the most significant, is that MRP is capacitive insensitive. Some considerations you should use when you look at MRP is that if you don't have MRP working, it can quickly disintegrate into multiple non-system workarounds, or what we call spreadsheet solutions. MRP must have accurate on-hand and production information. And the master schedule needs to be properly designed as a control point. And we'll talk about that when we look at the workbench. Change management skills are critical in the operating. We'll talk about that. And users must truly understand the system and its capability. Lots of education. A sandbox system with a test database and live production data is critical, or the system will disintegrate rapidly. Now let's look at several of the specific functions and tools by which we can theoretically optimize material requirements planning and the resultant production schedules. Calendars are critical to the operation of QAD's ERP software for several reasons. Firstly, dates play an enormous role in ensuring on-time delivery and production. The due date is the primary driver in QAD. It's used in sales orders, work orders, purchase orders. All the essential tools of ERP revolve around the accuracy of the due date. Having production line calendars can show at a glance what's being worked on, what the factory has, when it was done, what's scheduled. The calendar connects the entire QAD system. Every transaction contains dates that imply action. That's what the system records. A well-defined calendar system enables all the team members to be reading from the same hymnal. Calendars can be defined at multiple levels. If there's differences between shifts, hours, work days, calendars can be defined for domains, sites, production lines, work centers, process, suppliers, and customers as required. A caution: set up calendars only when necessary. Let them default as much as possible, as they can become cumbersome to maintain. We often hear that MRP explodes. What does that mean? What do you explode? The explosion translates the production plan or the master production schedule into detailed specific quantities, timing, and ordering requirements for each component or material through some very specific set of calculations. Explosions determine the necessary labor hours and operation details required for each part on the bill of material. Explosions ensure the correct material are available at the right quantities at the right time to meet the production plan. An explosion is a key process in MRP that translates higher level production into specific requirements based on the bill of material. There's 3 kinds of explosions in QAD: net change, regenerative, and selective. The net change is where the system only plans those items which have had activity that causes an item to fall out of phase with the production master schedule. When the system generated MRP required field is set to yes in 1.4.1 or 7.17, this indicates that the activity has transpired that would cause the item to be recalculated or re-exploded to bring it back into compliance with the master production schedule. The 23.3 selective runs MRP for a subset of items or a group of items or sites. Caution: 23.3 runs only based on selection. It does not explode bills of material. But the 23.2 regeneration replans all planned orders and regens a complete new plan based on the bill of material. You could run 23.3 selectively during the day. You could run 23.1 nightly, say, and then maybe 23.2 on a weekly basis. How you set that up is going to play as to how MRP operates. Sales and operations planning is the integrated business management process through which executive and leadership team continually achieves focus, alignment, and synchronization among all functions of the organization. This meeting reconciles supply, demand, and production plans at an aggregate or high level. It ties together the business plan, the production plan, and master production scheduling, subsequently MRP. The team reviews all performance from the previous period for continuous improvement. If anybody has read anything by Dick Lynn, Dick is the father of sales and operations planning. We don't have time to discuss in detail all that falls under S&OP, but understand that this drives the functions of MRP. All of these distribution, production, resource, and operations plan relate to the upper levels of MRP2 or ERP. A lot of good articles out there on SOP. Even if we note Dynasis, which is a application owned by QAD has a complete digital supply chain planning process. For more content on how to use SOP, you can check out on the 32 website our webinar on achieving successful sales and operations planning. As stated, MRP is driven by the sales and operation planning activity through forecast functionality into 22.1 forecast maintenance. Forecasting enables businesses to predict the future. With QAD, it supports seasonal bills, simulations, and other fluctuations. Remember, reliable forecasts are a key input to material requirements planning process. Is one of the primary optimizers of MRP. The more accurate you can make your forecast, the more accurate will be MRP. 22.1 forecast maintenance records the number of units of a particular item you expect to sell each period or week of a particular site. These are periods, not months. Depending on where in the month you place your periods can significantly impact MRP calculations, i.e. if you use the periods at the first of the month for the quantities or the last day of the month, this can significantly impact how MRP is going to calculate. In 7.24, sales order control, forward and backward consumption can be used to compensate for monthly inaccurate. This is always an interesting set of discussions between sales, input, and operations. We're having a February and October on forecasting and forecast simulation in QAD. You're welcome to join us then. Forecasts can be calculated in 22.7 forecast simulation module in QAD. Here, forecast simulation allows you to use the historical data stored in QAD to create multiple forecasts and store those forecast results in the system. No more spreadsheets. Regression models, production smoothing algorithms, period forecasts can all be created with 22.7. 22.7 has some extremely effective forecasting algorithms for forecasting demand. Double moving average, Winter's linear exponential smoothing, classical decomposition, regression analysis, along with an unlimited number of self-defined forecast methods. We're going to have a webinar again, as I mentioned, in October on that subject. After the forecast has been entered into 22.1, the demand is exploded and recognized in 23.14 and 23.17 as illustrated. Since forecasts are so central to your MRP process, there's several ways you can wreak havoc on MRP. If you try to forecast dependent demand, don't calculate dependent demand. Forecast independent demand, but don't confuse independent demand with sales quotas or budgets. Only forecast demand. And you must obtain a consensus quantity. Forecasting doesn't work unless everybody agrees it. Don't let forecasting become a black box. You need subjective, objective, intrinsic, extrinsic forecasting. If you do not use the appropriate math model, you can screw things up pretty good. And primarily, you must use 22.7. Otherwise, you lose everything to spreadsheets. Remember, the first principle of forecasting is always wrong. Forecast or focus on shortening lead time, not trying to use the perfect algorithm. Shorter lead times makes forecasting less important. Allocations in QAD MRP is the mechanism by which system reserves and assigns specific inventory quantities to meet demand for sales orders, work orders, or other requirements depending on account factors like lot control, key items, inventory status, to ensure efficient and accurate inventory management. The system can then calculate available to allocate for the total quantity on hand. You can even allocate based on a requirement to have it only from a single lot. The key item feature in QAD allows certain critical items to be designated where the system will prevent the release of a work order if there is insufficient quantities of that key item. Inventory status plays a key role in allocations, as the system considers inventory marked available for allocation only when fulfilling demand. Inventory can be allocated from sites, locations, lots, serial numbers, providing granular control over the assignment of stock to specific requirements. Allocations are often referred to as uncashed stockroom receipts. That is, the shop order or the custom order is printed and released, but material is not yet issued or moved to the inventory or WIP or usage. MRP handles allocations as an additional gross requirement for allocated items. Allocations can occur in two ways, either automatically or manually. Automatically, allocations are created in order entry or with auto allocation if the due date, again, calendar, is within the allocation window. Allocations can be created manually or adjusted due order entry or 16.5.2 or even 16.13.1. Allocations also come in two different types. First is general, kind of like I have a ticket on an airline for a flight to London. Or secondly is a detail allocation of inventory at a specific site or location. When I board a flight, I'm assigned to seat 17D, the aisle seat over the wing. That's allocations. Key items, as we mentioned, can be set in the item master to ensure a sufficient quantity on hand is of this critical material is available before the work order can be released. The function of 13.8 allocated inventory inquiry is to review the total item quantity on hand at status and site. This is the primary inquiry that allows planners to view allocated and unallocated items in inventory, providing a comprehensive overview of inventory available at specific sites and locations. This is probably the planner's most used browse besides the 3.21.2 transaction history. Just a few words about the difference between work orders and production orders. Production orders were introduced around 2016 by Guido and Carrie Ann and Brent, and production orders were to combine the functions of discrete work orders, repetitive, Kanban, and flow into one process, eliminating the duplicity of function and a new menu set. From 2019 to 2024, production orders have been optional. However, we heard this at MUG just last month. In 03, the only option for you will be to use production orders. There's some differences between work orders and production orders, but from an MRP perspective, work orders and production orders generate the dependent demand for components identically based on the bill of material. MRP nets open orders and considers work in process inventory the same way. Rescheduling production orders reruns MRP with the same logic. Lot sizing, the purpose of which in MRP is to control the quantity of the product produced. You can set up lot rules for individuals or groups of items. Lot sizing determines the quantity that is ordered or produced for each planned order. Lot sizing in MRP is primarily important to ensure the correct quantities of material are ordered and produced to meet demand. Lot sizing rules allow planners to specify factors like minimum, maximum, order, multiple order quantities to optimize the production plan. Lot sizing is kind of like the steering wheel for MRP. To calculate the optimum lot size, we can use what is called the EOQ, economic order quantity. As we see here, we have order costs. The more you order, the less the cost, balanced against the carrying cost. The more you order, the longer it's going to be, the more it's going to cost you to have inventory. So what economic order quantity does is it adds together the order cost and the total cost for that two cost curves to arrive at what is called the total cost, and the minimum point on that total cost curve is the most economic order quantity. Since we don't want to have to graph every item in inventory, we can use mathematics to calculate EOQ, and we can calculate either the value of EOQ or the unit value of EOQ. The formula is the square root of, in terms of dollars, the annual dollar juice times the setup divided by the carrying cost. Or if you want it in terms of units, it's the square root of 2 times the unit usage times setup divided by the carrying cost times the unit cost. So that value then can be input to MRP in the 1.4.7 or 1.4.17 at that order cost. There's 4 primary order types in QED MRP. There's a lot for lot, discrete orders. That means every time you have a net requirement in a period, MRP plans an order for that. This is very sensitive to change. To be very careful about how you use lot for lot, typically assigned to independent demand items at the master schedule. There's a fixed order quantity. This is normally what we call the EOQ we just talked about, which balances the cost of order against the cost of setup. Normally, always the same when projected quantity on hand goes negative. The dynamic lot size of POQ, period order quantity, is where the order quantity is equal to the exact net requirement for n periods into the future, varied by items. Cautious with POQ. It is overly hard to control. I've seen some MRP setup where every single part that you purchase is POQ 30. That's going to kill MRP. Really have to pay attention. There are other modifiers such as minimum order, maximum order, multiple orders. I've even seen more sophisticated models used, such as least unit cost or least total cost or part period balancing. Learning the optimal or correct value of these settings makes MRP work. These are the levers and knobs of the machine. Just to illustrate the number of permutations MRP calculations can have, here we see a chair with an arm assembly, 2 arm assemblies, and for every arm assembly, you've got 1 part number, along with the lead time, safety stock, lot size, and minimum and maximum order quantities. This is what is referred to as PFEP, a plan for every part. So if we explode with the MRP grid, we can just bring down the requirements from the MPS, double it because there's 2 assembly arms per each chair, and we can then go and calculate based on what that process is going to have. And you can see that as we walk across, MRP is calculating that projected quantity on hand. When it goes negative, it plans a net requirement. It plans a net or planned order receipt in that period of a net requirement and offsets it by lead time, and then takes that out through the planning horizon. We can then take those planned order releases of the arm assembly and blow those down to those requirements for the arm rest and go through that same process. But now we see we've got a POQ of 4 periods. So the planned order takes into account period 3, 4, 5, and 6, combines those into a planned order receipt in period 3, offsets that by the lead time, and the projected quantity on hand then goes forward. And again, we see that with a negative projected quantity on hand, we have a net requirement that has a POQ again of 4. And you can see if you change that POQ to 3 or 5 or have everything, it can really affect how MRP is going to net that process. So if you don't pay a lot of attention to lot sizing, you can screw up MRP real good. If you don't have the correct calculations of order quantity or ordering or carrying costs, that can give you the wrong EOQ, a wrong plan. You need to understand and accurately understand that usage properly. If you don't use order modifiers, min, max, multiples, if the supplier gives you a minimum quantity, this must be reflected in the MRP setup for that part. Same as order quantities from suppliers. Incorrect and use of placement of POQ order policy. Like I said, I've seen MRP systems where every single part is set at POQ 30. It makes it impossible. MRP is very sensitive and can quickly get out of control. Two extremely effective order policies in MRP are the calculation of MRP scrap and yield. As most times we don't manufacture things perfectly, we have to take this into account. Let's consider yield. Yield is defined as a ratio of unusable output from a process relative to its input. The value is applied to the parent and is defined in 14, 17, and 17. This increases the planned order quantity by the parent by inserting a scrap requirement element in the gross requirements of MRP. Here you can see if we're going to manufacture this, we lose 5% of our arm assemblies. Defective, that means we have to have a 95% yield. MRP is then going to round that up to 2 and 11 and record at that item level. You can see here, yield is displayed in MRP from that input, in this case 79%, and MRP displays a 85.05 scrap requirement in the 2317. That's 405 planned order, 85.05 scrap requirement minus 21% minus 100 equals the 79%. This is denoted as a scrap requirement in the MRP output. Scrap, on the other hand, is calculated as a percentage of a component that is wasted during the assembly of the parent. This increases the gross requirement of the component when exploded for the planned order of the parent. That is, if you lose 10% of the arms are wasted, that means that you have to have an additional requirement, which rounds up to the 223. This is defined at the parent component child relationship in 13.5 product structure or 15.5. Since scrap modifies the gross requirement, scrap does not show directly in MRP. It's not visible in 2317. Safety stock is a cardinal element of MRP. Safety stock is used to guard against variation. This is protection against fluctuation. The amount of safety stock depends on the variability of either the supplier or the demand, how often you order, what the lead time is in relation to the forecast period, and what service level you want to ensure for a particular item. So the safety stock can be expressed by the mathematical formula of K, service times adjusted MAD for the lead time interval. MRP considers safety stock a requirement and schedules planned orders to cover this amount. When a quantity on hand falls below the safety stock, MRP plans an order. As stated, safety stock guards against variability. However, a caution. You don't want to use safety stock in the middle levels or at the subassembly levels of MRP. This can cause the system to carry dead inventory, can cause material to be received earlier than needed, and can quickly cause the loss of MRP credibility. Recommendations for carrying safety stock are at the MPS level and at the lowest level of a purchase item where supply or demand is erratic. MRP handles safety stock as an additional net requirement in any period where the projected quantity on hand goes below the safety stock. So that formula, if you don't calculate it correctly, that can also play havoc with your MRP. If you don't understand the service factor, that's not just a directive from your boss. I want 95%. You need to calculate that. You need to understand the mean absolute deviation demand. Have a mechanism to record and measure the availability in both demand and lead time. Understand the difference between the lead time and the forecast and that ratio. If you're not measuring forecast area at the detail level, you should be aware of what the demand variability is. You can use safety lead time. We'll talk about that in just a second. And planners and buyers have a tendency, I've seen this so many times, set it and forget it. You cannot do that. MRPs set the zero net availability is now the safety stock. If you input safety stock, you bought it. Lead time is used by MRP to determine when to release planned orders for materials and components. MRP calculates a start date and due date for planned orders based on the lead time for the item. This is the time required to plan, to purchase, to procure, to move. For example, if you have a 2-week lead time, MRP schedules the planned order 2 weeks before that date is required. Accurate lead time is essential for effective materials planning and scheduling. Lead time is a dynamic variable and needs to be constantly planned and revalidated. The normal lead time is put into the 1.4.7 in manufacturing lead time or purchase lead time. A caution, if you're using 14.13.13 routing rollup, in my mind, never check that box yes. Because if you do, what MRP is going to do is it's going to use the router to determine the lead time, not what you've input. And that could be very, very detrimental to your MRP output. MRP uses manufacturing lead time to determine the suggested planned order release for parents. The 13.5 allows you to set what is called the lead time offset of a specific component on the bill of material. This is not the 1.4 lead time of the parent. The MRP pick list in MRP determines the component requirements using lead time plus lead time offset. This lead time can be negative. Think of a door on a cabinet as affixed to assembly. You don't need it at the end of the process. Safety lead time. MRP first calculates the actual need date and then subtracts the number of days of safety lead time. You should be cautious with the use of safety lead time. This can account for variability and uncertainty, but it can quickly get out of control. This should be not just somebody's dictate of a value. You should calculate it and codify it. Once MRP is exploded, the system uses several rules to recalculate the placement of scheduled order receipts. These are called the rules of misalignment. The first is an expedite. This happens when an order is scheduled for a period following the period in which the on-hand balance goes negative. In this case, the period 2 goes negative. MRP is going to tell you to expedite. De-expedite says that I've got 50. I don't need the 50 in period 6. So MRP is going to tell me to de-expedite. And I've seen it so many times. Planners ignore de-expedites. But remember, MRP works off what you've told it, and it assumes you're going to do what it says. So if you don't do the de-expedite, your plan's out of phase. And if you run into a situation where you have a scheduled receipt that it's not required out through the planning period, MRP is going to tell you to cancel it. I've probably said this 100 times. Lead times and due dates are critical to MRP. Through the explosion process and application of the misalignment rules, MRP recommends actions that the planner should take to bring the plan back into alignment with the master production schedule. Remember, MRP doesn't do anything, it only recommends. Action messages are generated by MRP to planners, and planners should do MRP action messages every day. MRP assumes it tells you to do, you're going to be successful. And if you don't, MRP is just going to recalculate the same thing. Planned order or planners must understand all action messages, what they mean, how to correct them, and the actions. If you hark back to your action messages, there are over 50 action message types in QAD. Planners should know the cause, the correction, and ramifications of each. Probably the most valuable reports available in MRP are the 2314 and the 2317. MRP summary and detail. These are the basic ways to visualize and understand what MRP is telling you and to manipulate the various data elements. Use these to see the changes and how they're affecting MRP. Firstly, take your action messages and prefer them in a test environment. You need to become very familiar with the result of the changes and how these reports look when corrected. Such things as PO receipts, PO received short, cycle count, change of planning parameter, order policy, safe stack, and a dozen more affect the MRP plan. There are many other MRP parameters that affect MRP and can be used to fine-tune the MRP scheduling calculations. We went over most of these in February when we talked about the nuts and bolts and all of the elements of the item master file. As discussed earlier, in the late 2016 version of QAD, production orders were introduced as an alternative to work orders, advanced schedule, Kanban's flow scheduling. At that time, they also introduced 22.20.1 master scheduling workbench. This workbench is intended to increase master scheduling efficiency by allowing users to simulate and commit schedule changes, interact with production line, work centers. You can set up this PFEP, a plan for every part, and it streamlines the master production schedule. This is what it looks like. Master scheduling gives you the visibility of a number of different functions. I've heard 41 different functions, all now in one workbench format, depending on whether you have QAD version of SE or EE or O through 03. Remember, in 03, you're only going to be able to use production orders, but with the other versions of QAD, this 22.20.1 master schedule workbench is so effective. You see master scheduling, production, scheduling, shortage report, all in one place. You've got production orders, maintenance, demand and supply details, item planning, item master, and you can take any action you need. I remember when I was a planner, I would have died for this because this gives you one place to do everything you need to do as a planner. Remember, one of the primary shortcomings of MRP is it is capacitive insensitive. You must, to make MRP work, have resource requirements planning and rough cut capacity planning above MRP and below MRP capacity requirements planning in place to make MRP non-capacitive insensitive. The capacity requirements load or work center load determines the workload calculated from scheduled seats from planned orders in a given department or specific work center. It displays the work days, the work center capacity, work center load, capacity, less load, and cumulative. I'd recommend, we did a 32South website or webinar last year on production capacity planning in QAD that you might go look at. Product change. All things in your manufacturing environment change. It's critical that you control the change process to ensure MRP is generating the most accurate change process. The PCC module is a critical part of QED's ERP, MRP software. All things in your manufacturing environment change. It's critical that you control these changes. Without PCC, MRP does not work. Besides cost accounting, which I've mentioned above, a planner's best friend is a good product data management team. Failure to have product control or change control in MRP could put in jeopardy your items, don't have the correct data, bills of material can be wrong, work centers, routings, sales orders need to be updated, work orders, repetitive schedules. ERP not updated with control will cause significant issues with your supply chain. For all planners, it helps to understand all detailed elements, fields, and tables that make MRP work. Often, more often than not, MRP is just not working the way it was planned, and a re-implementation of MRP may be warranted. A couple of issues to concern yourself because you probably will be faced with this circumstance. Set clear objectives, defined and agreed upon, signed, agreed. Senior management must support it because re-implementation of MRP is a real expensive process. You need to clean up the data. The bad data didn't work. Even consider changing business process changes. Review and simplify your products and routings, and review and refine your planning parameters, and finally, most importantly, train and re-educate. Remember, you can't just go out and buy an MRP system. It's not like learning Excel or Word or PowerPoint. You have to learn it where you are in your organization, in relation to your organization, how they run the business. And then if you're lucky, all of the ERP systems that you've been exposed to previously. If you've got a company with 25 million, a re-implementation probably going to cost you $375,000 to $500,000. If you got $1 billion corporation, it could cost you $20 to $30 million. It has been said that ERP is the most complex software in terms of future in the world. It's a huge expense, and there's lots to learn. MRP is not the only scheduling tool for manufacturing. It's most common, but not the only one. Let's consider a couple more. Reorder point, sometimes called the sawtooth curve. This is defined as the demand through lead time plus safety stock. We talked about safety stock. This is intended to notify when a particular item has gone below a set reorder point. Demand and lead time are in a constant state of flux, and they must be measured. I remember before MRP, everything was reorder point on Cardex systems. In QAD, we use 3.6.2 reorder point report for monitoring this process. This requires constant attention and regrettably is a backward-looking tool. However, you can set this for both safety stock and reorder point. So it can tell you when you need to go take action. I ran across demand-driven MRP a number of years ago. It's an offshoot of MRP with demand-driven and buffer stages. It was developed by Chad Smith and Carol Patak back in 2011. And it contains key elements such as strategic placement of these inventory positioning and their buffer profiles. You can adjust MRP dynamically. It's driven by MRP instead of a forecast, and it has visible and collaborative execution. You can use these 5 working elements to drive a supply chain and execution system. I would highly recommend a planner look at this potential option to MRP. QAD's Dynasis system is in fact DRP certified. Advanced planning systems, sometimes referred to as supply chain towers, are software tools that help manufacturers across the entire supply chain. I would refer you to a 30C software webinar we did last year on supply chain tower webinars. Advanced planning systems are often integrated with ERP, MES, and other software applications to provide a comprehensive production planning. Factory physics. We just did a presentation on factory physics at MUG this spring, and we'll do another one in June. It's a look at or a new approach to manufacturing operations planning that was established in 1976 by Wallace Hopp and Mark Spearman. It's the application of scientific principles and mathematical modeling. It uses disciplines from physics, mathematics, engineering, operations, and operations research. It's basically composed of 8 key concepts or principles. Little's Law, which defines inventory as equal to throughput, time, flow time, work in process. Q theory, variability and variance, capacity and bottlenecks, control theory, lean manufacturing, and theory of constraints. Unless you've had your head in the sand the last many years, one of the familiar with AI, artificial intelligence. This is making a computer be able to learn, reason, and have perception and use language and data. As a planner, I often thought that what I did as a planner could be codified by some robot. Now with the likes of ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Bard, Copilot, this is becoming true. Remember, they say AI won't take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. It's a great time to be alive. Quantum computing is the next cutting edge area of computer science that's going to impact the supply chain and MRP. Quantum computing uses the principles of quantum theory and quantum bits or qubits, which can exist in multiple states simultaneously, unlike a standard computer of bytes and bits equal on or off, 0 or 1. By harnessing superposition, entanglement, interference, quantum computers can process complex calculations exponentially faster and tackle problems that are infeasible for traditional computers. Think what this means for the supply chain. Quantum computing holds immense potential in all sorts of fields. After quantum computing, then comes the quantum internet. This is a hypothetical high-speed network using qubits to provide new functionality like quantum cryptography, quantum cloud computing. Quantum internet is theoretically still 10 to 15 years away, but it is going to change how we do supply chain. So what do we cover today? We talked about items, bombs, calculators, explosions, lot size, safety stock factors that can adversely impact your MRP. No kidding, MRP is hard. Technology takes effort and intellect. It takes a concerted team effort to ensure understanding, accuracy, timeliness, and consistency in planning and execution. You've already got one of the best ERP systems out there. Learn how to use it. Just a word about what are the primary things you need to consider when dealing with MRP: lead time accuracy, on-hand accuracy, forecast techniques, order history, seasonality, open orders, sales order, work orders, work centers, machine capacity, accurate bombs, and finally, training and current and accurate data updates. Besides understanding MRP, one of the big issues with MRP is the massive amount of data and logic that needs to go into the data tables. 32 soft loaders can help bring logic, accuracy, and consistency into your MRP planning process. There are over 52 menus in QAD that contain the word materials and planning in QAD. MRP is one of the hardest things you can do with ERP. Control is complex, and we should want to build our MRP acumen. I would recommend that you go look online for resources, courses, books, certifications. There's the QAD forum There's the user groups, the West Coast, Midwest, Southeast user groups, as Jeff had just mentioned. The knowledge base, my place after F1 is the knowledge base. And then there's the QAD document. So it's everything you ever wanted to know about QAD if you look hard enough. And then the Learning Center, great place to learn about QAD functionality. The LinkedIn and Progress Talk have QAD forums that are very appropriate. And we've included a list on the 32Soft website of all the URLs that we use to produce this presentation. Just go click and it will take you to the explanation of MRP, work orders, etc. Always good to learn how to use social media and this new artificial intelligence to search for information in this age of Aquarius. We hope you've enjoyed this quick review of the tools that you can use in QAD's MRP application to make the system operate better. Process of utilizing electronic tools is a challenge. There are so many aspects of a viable ERP system. A proper understanding of MRP is a good tool for executing a plan for your organization's success. Please contact Denise, myself, Alex. If you think of any questions regarding ERP or QAD, I appreciate your attendance. And Jeff, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Don. Really appreciate your time today. Very informative session. A lot of material packed in there, and it's always a treat, I think, to get these real nuts and bolts sessions on how to use QAD. I think that's really valuable to the user community. So we appreciate your time. We're right up kind of near the top of the hour, but we do have a few minutes for some questions. If anybody in attendance has a question for Don about what he talked about, you can use the Q&A feature and type your question there. If you want to raise your hand, hit the raise hand icon. I will enable your mic. You can ask a question. And I open the floor to any questions from anybody at this time.
Yeah, Jeff, just a quick word. There's a lot of information there. And I would highly recommend anybody go back and look in detail at each one of those slides and actually experiment in a test database with QAD. Because like I say, you can't buy this. Mm-hmm. You, me, anybody else can't buy an MRP system. The only way you can do it is to use your company's environment. So I'd recommend a real solid look at everything we talked about, in addition to all of that information about the item master file and the planning elements that can impact QAD. So
yeah, and to that point, I will note that there will be an archived recording of today's webinar up on the WECUG website for members to access, and with Don's permission, we'll also put a copy of his slides up there as he mentioned.
Excellent.
So both
Absolutely.
of those will be there for review if any of you would like to go back and revisit that. And I don't know, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I'll give it a few more seconds here if anybody thinks of anything. Otherwise, we'll close out and hopefully do this again. And it's always a treat to have Don speak at our events. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I'd like to remind you all again, stay tuned for the next things on the horizon for the WECUG. Would be great to plan a fall conference, and if we're able to do that, you'll certainly all be informed about it. It looks like we do have a question submitted. Yes, Tanya from Adaptivity asks if we'll provide a link to the recording. Yes, once that's available, we'll link it up on the members' website for everyone here to access. So thank you for that.
Could I plug the next online webinar?
Absolutely.
Is that still May 20th? I think it is.
Well, none for the WECUG at this moment. We may have some later on.
Okay.
But
I
know you and 32Soft do some as well. So certainly you're welcome to plug those, and anybody can go to the either website to find out about those. So.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate everybody's attention and wish you a wonderful May. And like I say, we are going to have another webinar on factor physics in June. And then I'll be doing a webinar on cost in cost sets in July, if anybody's interested. So
Excellent.
thanks for writing me, and it's always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much, Don. Thank you everyone for attending, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Take
Thank
care.
you.